After we became engaged, Thomas and I moved in together. Without consulting me first, he invited his mother to move in with us and began treating me like a maid. I was transported to the hospital after being involved in a car crash one day. To make matters worse, the person who caused the accident left the scene and is still missing. According to the doctor, who warned me that I may have a chronic limb injury, Thomas and his mother attacked me, saying things like, "I'm going to marry a decent wife," instead of expressing care. "I'll end the relationship with someone who requires medical attention. She is a problematic thing. She's not a match for Thomas," his mother said. "A faulty product needs simply to vanish." I watched them leave the room. After we became engaged, Thomas and I moved in together. Without consulting me first, he invited his mother to move in with us and began treating me like a maid. I was transported to the hospital after being involved in a car crash one day. To make matters worse, the person who caused the accident left the scene and is still missing. According to the doctor, who warned me that I may have a chronic limb injury, Thomas and his mother attacked me, saying things like, "I'm going to marry a decent wife," instead of expressing care. "I'll end the relationship with someone who requires medical attention. She is a problematic thing. She's not a match for Thomas," his mother said. "A faulty product needs simply to vanish." I watched them leave the room laughing, too surprised and sad to say anything. It was difficult enough to call off the engagement, but it was intolerable to learn that he intended to wed someone else and leave me. I was filled with rage and resolved not to let this pass. I'm Hannah Wales, a 45-year-old stay-at-home mom. Thomas, who is 2 years my junior, and I have been engaged for a year. Through my best friend Allison, I got to know Thomas. He was an enjoyable person who enjoyed eating out and sports. I've never been a big talker, therefore I was always drawn to others who were. I found out that Thomas had lost his father about the same time I described losing my parents in a middle school accident, and we grew close because of this common trauma. Thomas proposed to me, and we moved in together as our relationship developed with the goal of getting married. But living together exposed Thomas's actual character. He was a big man with an enormous appetite who had played soccer in the past. Even though I'm a light eater, I still enjoyed watching Thomas eat a lot when we went out to eat. I loved the delicious food. It was nice to watch him eagerly gobble up a huge steak or some spaghetti. Thomas, nevertheless, also had to consume a lot of food at home. I was originally glad to prepare a lot of side dishes for him since I knew he would eat a lot. Because I worked a full-time job, I frequently arrived home later than Thomas. I came back, tired, to find my meal gone from the refrigerator and just shredded cabbage in the saucepan. "Thomas, did you eat my portion too?" I inquired. Watching a soccer match, he puckered up his cheeks and said, "Yeah, mine wasn't enough." It stunned me. Even after 2 plates of mashed potatoes, a mountain of Caesar salad, a soup packed with components, and 2 beefsteaks, he was still not satisfied. Reluctantly, I swallowed my grumblings and went to a supermarket to get food for myself. This repeated a few more times, but I was not one for confrontations, so I simply prepared another lunch. Maybe it was a mistake on my part to tolerate his actions without becoming upset. Thomas eventually continued to overeat, even though we were simply the 2 of us sharing a home. By the time I arrived home, no matter how much food I made for 4 or 5 people, it would all be gone. And if that wasn't enough, he would even consume the frozen side dishes I put out for my lunchbox, cup noodles, and frozen cuisine. He would even disregard notes I would leave, even if they said, "I have plans for these, please don't eat them." Furthermore, Thomas continued to overindulge when we shared a meal. He used his fork to reach across and grab fish or meat from my plate. He would give me a perplexed look when I objected, saying, "You don't eat much, so I'm doing you a favor." If it was left uneaten, wouldn't that be a waste? I was going to eat that. Ask me first. He laughed it off and apologized. Sorry. But he repeated the action over the following lunch. Thomas had never been able to cook and had always lived at home. However, I was in charge of everything, from meal planning to buying and cooking, because I had moved out of my aunt and uncle's home after finishing college. There was only so much food I could make at once, even if I could cook more given the restrictions on preparation and refrigerator storage. 6 months into living together, Thomas's health exam predictably revealed that he had excessive blood sugar and was overweight. Thomas pushed out his chest and declared, "A man should be massive. It looks more imposing," when I warned him to eat less. But women must be slender. What is that supposed to mean? I couldn't understand. "You know, Hannah, it would be terrible if you got any fatter." Thomas chuckled. "I'll take care of your meal." I started to protest. "Excuse me, I'm actually of medium weight." But Thomas grabbed a big piece of limited edition pudding from a well-known retailer and shoved it in his mouth before I could stop him. The only thing remaining was a thin film that adhered to the cup's bottom. "This pudding is excellent. Will you purchase some more?" "Hannah, please do it. It's a bother to queue up," Thomas replied sarcastically as he walked out of the table grinning broadly. I suppressed my annoyance. The question, "Hannah, what time will you be coming home tomorrow?" came from his mother right then. I said, "Probably after 7 p.m., pondering her question. His mother angrily reprimanded me, saying, "Thomas happily eats your terrible cooking. Who are you to complain? He has, however, been consuming every side dish lately." I gently objected, saying, "He even takes the food I store at home." "Let Thomas eat plenty. He works hard." She snapped back. She screamed in a loud voice, "You're barely working a decent job anyway," and hung up. With a groan, I hung up the phone. As our time together drew on, Thomas's conceit only deepened. Thomas initially assisted with other home tasks in addition to cooking, but he stopped completely after 6 months. "Thomas, as we already discussed, please bring in the laundry when I get home late. Additionally, please clean the restroom," I asked. Thomas, who was fidgeting with his phone while lounging on the sofa, answered, "I'm tired when I get home from work," without opening his eyes. "I'm also hungry. You need to take care of that stuff." Even I'm exhausted. "We made this decision from the beginning?" I objected. Thomas scowled deeply and interrupted me, saying, "Stop bothering. I make more money than you do since I work for a big corporation. Furthermore, you're a female. You ought to be able to balance your work and household. Everyone else does as well." When Thomas became mad, he would ignore me for days, and I had to apologize every time to get them to stop fighting. My mother-in-law moved in without notice, which added to my already unsettling feeling of unease about living with Thomas. I'm home. As soon as I stepped into the living room, I lost my words. Big boxes were stacked in the corner, and my mother-in-law was sitting next to Thomas on the sofa, laughing crazily while watching TV. My mother-in-law had stopped over here and there previously, but she was there to see Thomas, not me. Her car in the parking lot on a weekday seemed strange, but what was going on? "Hey, Hannah, glad you're back. I'm hungry, so please cook dinner soon," she pleaded. "You're here, Mother? Thomas, what's with the bags?" I questioned Thomas as I summoned him into the hallway. "This should be clear. These are my mother's relocation boxes. We're going to live together starting today, so please be kind," he answered. "It's alarming how sudden this is," I objected. "At least you could have discussed it with me first," I said, raising my voice. Thomas said with a scowl on his face, "It's okay. I invited her over earlier since we were planning to live together when we were married." My mother-in-law overheard us talking and said, "He's the eldest son. It makes sense. Why do you require your consent?" Thomas crossed his arms and nodded in agreement, and I was left feeling completely demoralized. There was no winning once the two of them joined up against me. That's when the days of horror started. My mother-in-law did not do any housework, as if it came naturally. Instead, she would ask me to prepare her coffee, which she would always say was too weak or lukewarm. She also didn't appear to pick up after herself, leaving beer cans and empty snack bags lying about and leaving the cardboard boxes from her internet buys untouched. She never even threw away her garbage, so I was constantly cleaning up after her. She didn't pay for food or utilities while imposing on us, and she was often complaining, saying, "Hannah, I heard you told Thomas to do the household chores. Let him unwind at home. He's exhausted from work. I also have a full-time job. I believe that splitting up household chores is typical for working couples." I at last asserted my own position. With a narrowed gaze, my mother-in-law said, "Who do you think you are? Acting haughty when your income is less than Thomas's." "You're correct. Earn more than me before forming an opinion," Thomas said. My mother-in-law was Thomas's staunch ally, so his conceit just grew. I wished I had waited longer to move in together before choosing the wedding location, but it was too late as our first anniversary drew near. I was so excited when he proposed that we hurriedly started looking at wedding locations and made a reservation. These days, I find it impossible to live a joyful married life with Thomas and his mother. My aunt and uncle, who were my foster parents, were overjoyed to meet Thomas and seemed to be celebrating the marriage of their own daughter. It's comforting to know if he works for that organization. They commented, "Thomas is such a nice and bright guy." Telling my aunt and uncle the truth is scary, but I don't want to bitterly accept this circumstance. I've made the decision to call off both the wedding and the engagement. I got in a car accident right after I made my decision. When I opened my heavy eyelids in response to someone calling my name, I was inside an ambulance. "Can you tell me your name?" an EMT said as she stared into my face. "Yes, Hannah Wales," I said back. I could feel my right leg twisted strangely, but I was unable to move it, and a stinging pain surged through my right face. The EMT told me, "We'll be at the hospital soon." I was too sleepy to realize what was going on. Last night I should have been sleeping in my bed, but instead I woke up in an ambulance. How did this come about? I had woken up, got ready for work, and ridden my scooter. I had entirely forgotten about it. It became evident that I had struck the right side of the head when I was taken to the emergency hospital and had a CT scan. There was no harm to my brain because of the helmet. My memory problem should go away with time, the doctor indicated. My leg suffered substantial ligament damage in addition to a fracture that would heal in roughly 2 months. The doctor returned to my room to explain the issue after doing surgery on my leg and after the anesthetic had worn off. The doctor said seriously, "It will be difficult for your right leg to fully recover. Walking on your own will likely be difficult in the future." Everything around me appeared to get darker as the doctor spoke. Shaking, I questioned, "Will I be unable to walk?" "Certainly not. You will need to use a wheelchair." The world appeared to become gray all of a sudden. I fixed my gaze on my bandaged, hanging right leg. "Incidentally, the cops have been holding out for some time." "Are you able to communicate with them?" asked the doctor. "Yes. Well, what is it?" I answered. "The culprit fled the scene, so they're here to give up on that information." The doctor then turned to face the police officers who were standing at the entrance. The 2 policemen gave a quick rundown of the circumstances. "Witnesses at the site report that you were struck from the right by a car that seemed to have a beginner's mark on it. The young woman motorist just drove off after striking you. We will provide an update as soon as the culprit is found." Before they departed, they said, "Take care." I wept in private after the cops departed. Why did I have to experience this? Was there something I didn't do right? My only goals were to work, get married, and live a happy life. It was difficult for me to cry on my face as my leg was hanging there. Luckily, the general ward was fully occupied, so I was given a private room. Someone opened the door without knocking, weeping. A nurse had asked whether I should get in touch with my family before the operation, so I did, messaging Thomas, my aunt, my uncle, and even a coworker to explain the situation. When my aunt, uncle, and coworker came before the procedure, they appeared as though they were going to weep. I pondered whether Thomas and his typically aloof mother might express empathy in light of my situation, but my naive expectations were quickly dashed. Thomas laughed, pointing at my face, which was full of tears. "What a disgusting face. You were unattractive to begin with, but now you're even worse." "That's not very polite, Thomas." Even my mother-in-law, who was trying to defend me, couldn't contain her laughter when she heard that I was in agony. "So, when will you be leaving? Come back soon and cook for us." "That's precisely what you're good at," I said, getting angry at their callous behavior. "I'm hurt. Can't you say anything better? It appears that I will spend around 2 months in the hospital. We must postpone the wedding location for the time being." "What? Who is going to look after us?" I went on, despite my mother-in-law's disapproval. "It appears that I could potentially have a disability in my leg," the doctor stated, adding that I might have to use a wheelchair full-time. Thomas's mother glanced back at him. Thomas said, "But we'll get a huge insurance payout from the criminal, right?" Abruptly, as if recalling something. "We may rebuild the house and profit handsomely from the sale with that money. So it can be all right, even if you are unable to work. It's fantastic that you may receive money even if you don't work, Hannah." They both seemed unhappy when I finally explained that the offender had run away. Afterward, my mother-in-law stated, "You're useless. Thomas, stop dating her. Being burdened like this is a waste." "Yeah, really." Thomas promptly repeated their dreadful comments. He made the startling statement, "Mom, I'm actually going to marry Anna," while glancing at my mother-in-law. "She cooks really well, so I kept her around, but I should have gotten rid of her sooner." "See? I was right all along," my mother-in-law declared triumphantly as she directed her sly smirk in my direction. "Thomas is going to wed someone else, a younger, more attractive, and more submissive woman than you." Thomas smiled down at me as I lay in the hospital bed. "All we have to do is change the bride's name. There's no problem with the wedding next week. I intend to wed a respectable woman. I'll end the relationship with someone who requires assistance, a faulty item." Crushed by their callous remarks. "She's not a match for Thomas. A defective product should just disappear." I was too startled to reply and instead chose to watch them chuckle as they left the room. I looked at the ceiling in blankness as the hospital room fell silent again, remembering well what Thomas and his mother had done. Thomas was engaged to me, but he was also much in love with Anna and intended to wed her. My body wanted to leave me like this, but as I settled down, a scorching rage erupted from inside. We couldn't forgive our engagement being ended. Not to mention that he had another person he saw as his primary interest. How much more degrading could he get? "Thomas, keep this in mind. I won't give up on this." The days were really difficult, being confined to the hospital room and hanging by my leg. I was able to tolerate the physical discomfort because of powerful medicines, but it was really distressing to be limited in my movement. During the day, I could still keep myself occupied by watching TV or going through comic books and movies on my phone. Bedtime was the problem. It took me a long time to fall asleep since I couldn't move, and when I did, I had terrible dreams. I would try to flee from a ghost in the dark, but my legs would not move. I would use my arms to crawl away, but before I knew it, the ghost would come up to me and nearly strike before I woke up frightened. My heart was pounding, and I was sweating profusely. I would realize, gasping for air, that it was only a dream. I had a hard time falling asleep again, and I spent the entire morning aimlessly gazing at my phone. I saw a nurse after experiencing nightmares for 2 nights in a row, and she prescribed me sleeping drugs. It appears that a lot of people have sleeplessness as a result of their pain and the strange surroundings. I was able to sleep peacefully till morning after taking the sleeping medications as advised by the nurse, which helped to ease some of my discomfort. Thomas was probably having fun in his new married life while I grieved. I found the idea repulsive, but every time I forced myself to remember, Thomas would soon return pleading. I would be able to turn him away with satisfaction. Thomas called 3 days after the accident, as I was lowering my dinner plate and idly glancing at my phone. Reluctantly, I returned his frequent calls after he had initially ignored me. "Yes, hey, what's going on?" Thomas said something without saying hello. "What do you want?" I inquired icily, knowing why. "An agent came and told me that I must leave the house this week," stated the man. "And why didn't you ask before selling my car?" "It's my business what I do with my own house and automobile, right? I was planning to bring Anna into that house, and now you're kicking me out all of a sudden." Thomas whimpered pitifully as he heard this. "That is absurd." "I'm not aware of that." I cut him off with a stern tone. "My aunt and uncle built that house as a graduation present. I intended to stay alone when I moved out on my own. But I suppose there has to be a lot more modification if I'm going to be using a wheelchair. Just because the house is too big, I thought about offering it up for sale and moving to a single-story house," Thomas said after he eventually got it. "That's fine, but why are you throwing us out?" I was taken aback by the question and had to shout, "Since you two are strangers?" "We are obviously not strangers." Thomas continued babbling, so I shot out, "We're ex-fiancés." "I'm not bothered at all. You may live on the first floor, Anna and I on the second, and Mom on the third floor of this large 3-story house. I take it that's how we split it up?" I squeezed my temples and inhaled deeply, overcome by the ridiculousness. "After all, it was you who forcefully continued with the plan of living with your mother, wasn't it?" Sensation bubbling up inside me. I attempted to talk calmly. I recalled that he had driven the automobile by himself and remarked, "Even the car. If you barely use it, I'll use it instead." "Don't you think that's foolish?" Thomas was silent for a moment. He spoke gently. "Mom believes she purchased the home and the automobile after a minute. What's the purpose of acting like a family?" Thomas was stunned when I said it with a mixture of surprise and shock. Nonetheless, he persisted further because he was inherently persistent. "Hey, don't force me to sell it. Mom wants a rental on this floor if we move since she enjoys living here. In a few days, it's hard to find one. I could think about lending it to you if you could pay $1,000 in rent." Thomas looked at me angrily and increased his voice. "Oh, you had to be kidding. Such a selfish woman," he swore. Then angrily said, "Fine, I'll figure it out myself," and hung up. Thomas and his mother paid their second visit about the time I was cleared by a nurse to use a wheelchair and was given clearance to access the lounge and store. After being ejected from the house, I thought they would be dejected, but to my surprise, they were happy. "Hey, dear thing, hasn't the swelling on your face decreased a little?" "Even so, it's still an unattractive face," they mocked, giving me the impression that I was speaking to elementary school students. "Have you finished moving, or are you still living in a hotel?" I asked, not really caring, to be honest. His mom's face brightened. Because Thomas is well off, he was able to find a new flat on the 15th floor rather quickly. The vista at night is breathtaking. "It's encouraging to hear," I said in a monotone. Thomas mocked me. "With such legs, you must be out of employment, right?" With a filthy sneer. "You will be responsible for covering all hospital and outpatient costs if the offender is not located. However, it will be quite expensive if you continue to visit the hospital without improving." I wanted to respond that the expensive healthcare system eases the personal loan, but the trouble of it all was too great, so I said nothing. His mother's voice brightened. "You've always behaved badly. It's entirely your own fault. A faulty product ought simply just to hang on to its disability payments and live in poverty indefinitely. I'm having fun living as a newlywed with Anna. She obeys her mother, unlike you. She doesn't seem to mind if I eat a lot." "What a wonderful daughter-in-law she is. I'm excited about having grandchildren." His mother squealed. "If you have no reason to be here, could you please leave?" I said weary words. Thomas was furious, and his mother was too. "You're still just as disagreeable as when we came to see you. You are flawed because of your haughty attitude. That's the reason I called off our engagement," they allegedly said, while spouting cynicism at me. I was ready to throw them out of the hospital room when there was a knock, and the nurse came out looking a little taken aback. "You have a guest, Miss Wales. Could I please let them inside?" I nodded, opening the door for the unknown guest to enter. Behind the nurse materialized a shy young woman in her early 20s. She burst into tears the moment she saw me with my right leg in a splint, bandages covering my face, and scars on my right side. "Oh, what have I done?" She started crying as soon as she got to the bed. Thomas and his mother exchanged bewildered glances with the woman. "Excuse me, are you the person who was driving during the incident?" With hesitation, I inquired. The woman nodded in between sobs. She got up and introduced herself, saying, "Yes, I am the culprit. After causing the accident, I ran away since my mind was blank. But ever since, I've had a terrible time eating or sleeping." She sobbed. "My mother chastised me for not eating when I was in my room, since she was so concerned about it. I came here because I wanted to apologize in person before turning myself in." At the foot of the bed, the offender bowed deeply while kneeling on the floor. She raised her voice and exclaimed, "I am so sorry for what I've done." Sensing that she was truly sorry, I gently said, "Thank you for coming forward." When it came time to confront the offender, I had expected to let my rage out, but I was unable to do so. Although I was angry and felt resentful for being left in such a position, I was unable to criticize her as I could tell that she was genuinely sorry. She bowed one more before leaving the space. Thomas said, his expression horrified, "What a bore. Hannah, if it had persisted, you would have had to pay out of your own cash because she's been hidden all this time." Thomas widened his eyes at his mother's statement. "So she would have been caught sooner or later, huh?" he said. "You're correct. In addition, you'll get a hospital allowance in addition to pay, right? After all, you are the life insurance policy's beneficiary." Yes, I had forgotten everything about it. I had changed my fiancé Thomas's insurance beneficiary when we moved in together. With a mischievous smile, his mother handed me a big envelope from the insurance company and added, "You can't change the recipient's name when receiving it, so if Hannah processes the insurance claim, it all goes to you, Thomas." "I imagine you're bored while you're in the hospital," she said, grinning slyly. "You should give this another read, thanks to such a generous ex-fiancé." I had to laugh when I looked down at the life insurance paperwork after they had departed. The next weekend, as I was having bottled tea and catching up with Anna, the door to the hospital room burst open. "Hannah, you did it, didn't you?" Thomas rushed in, holding his phone tightly, and was clearly furious. "Hey, a friend is visiting. Can this wait?" I said in response. "Shut up. Look at this." Thomas pushed his phone in our direction. I gave Anna a quick look, then I peered at the screen. Anna unfolded a long, furious message there. "Thomas, you were engaged to Hannah in addition to me. It's unbelievable that you two were roommates." Trapped, Thomas shot back. "Hannah was the one who was always putting pressure on me." "Wasn't the mansion you previously showed me owned by Hannah? The claim that you were residing in an apartment while it was being repaired was also untrue." Anna was even more enraged. Thomas cried out, "I'm sorry, Anna. Please forgive me." Anna shot back, "I can't trust you or your mother anymore." "By the way, who told you all this?" Thomas was clearly confused. "Is it significant? Did you also choose to marry me because I'm a nurse, believing that I would be happy to look after your mother in the future?" Thomas seemed genuinely surprised. "Then was that true? I will no longer be a caregiver going forward. It is the reason I am divorcing you. Please turn in the paperwork to the city office. I'll sign and mail it." "Anna, I truly do love you. Hold on, I want to stay together," Thomas said frantically. That was the end of the talk. Thomas violently thrust the divorce papers in my direction and said, "You played dirty. That's what must be going on. Are you really so envious of my contentment?" Not me. But Anna was the one who started laughing. She wiped her tears from her eyes and laughed hysterically for a moment before looking down at Thomas. "When Hannah first contacted me, I wasn't sure what to think. But Thomas, you truly have a horrible personality. I wouldn't have introduced her to you if I had known." Thomas responded by snapping at Anna. "It is not relevant to you. I need to talk to Hannah about something. Just go home," Thomas angrily yelled. I told him the specifics, and he gasped. "I'm the one who told Anna." With a severe expression, Anna gazed at Thomas. Watching a respected subordinate get upset infuriates me. I told Hannah everything, therefore, after conferring with her. I spoke out. "I take it Anna is the daughter of one of your mother's friends? Up until now, hasn't she been swallowing all of this care for the bond between her mother and your mother?" That she was able to make a decision. Thomas yelled aggressively at me, his face contorted with fury and his neck going crimson. "When did you get the authority to lecture me about your flaws? When you depend on disability payments, you're basically a drain on society." "Thomas, are you unaware of my past?" I indicated that my family works in medicine, but I felt like Thomas and his mother would start begging for money if I told them the whole truth. With comprehension, Anna gave a nod. "Ah, that makes sense. Both of you, stop your annoying chatter." There was a knock on the door, and it opened while Thomas was scolding us. A slim, elegant man came in and said hello. "I'm sorry for the delay in introducing myself. I just got back from a conference in Germany earlier today." "Yes, I am aware of that," I said. "Director, it's been a while," I said as we greeted each other. Thomas suddenly lost his temper and cut us off. "Old guy, I was still chatting. Just be silent for a moment. Your shouting may be heard through the open door to the nurse's station." Confronted with a stern tone of reproach, Thomas found himself speechless. The director gave him a fierce glance and went on. "Miss Wales can't take the things you've been saying any longer. Even so, do you know who she is?" "I can say whatever I want because she was my ex-fiancé. It is not relevant to you." The man let out a heavy sigh, frowning at Thomas's arrogant attitude. "If you have a disappointment, express it in detail. Are you unaware that Miss Wales serves as this hospital's chairperson?" the man stated. Thomas seemed confused for a moment. After a brief pause, he burst into laughter. "Let me be clear. She is a hospital employee, not a medical professional." The director said, "With the governor's agreement, one can become a board member even if she is not a doctor." I grinned widely at what he said. Yes, I had kept it a secret from Thomas, but my parents had left me the property for the hospital network. In total, it is valued at around $29 million. Thomas's jaw dropped wildly in shock. The last blow was administered by Anna. Hannah even turned down the invitation to utilize the VIP private room since she didn't want to be biased. Did she not? Of course, critically sick patients should have access to such chambers. The director grinned proudly. "As expected, Ms. Wales. That's why the board members respect you so much." After a period of being stunned, Thomas regained consciousness and appeared ashamed. He attempted to leave the room when we were having a nice talk, but he was caught red-handed when his phone rang. Hastily, "Mom, I'm coming home now," he said. We looked at Thomas suspiciously as he blinked quickly and paled. "Hannah, when will the life insurance be deposited?" was his urgent question. Calmly, I answered, "It won't be. You are the beneficiary, thus I terminated the procedure." Thomas groaned in helplessness and fell to the ground. "What happened?" Worried, I asked. He mumbled in a faint voice, "My mom charged $50,000 on my card for shopping." What? Did she embark on an expensive shopping spree for name brands? She intended to use the life insurance to pay it back. I chuckled. Thomas gave me a cunning smile as he looked up. "Hey, Hannah, you can pay off our loan fast, right? You have $29 million in assets. Because we were engaged as a kind gesture." I was taken aback. He had used me and made fun of me for being a flawed, impoverished person, and now he was even bold enough to say this. I firmly remarked, "You have some nerve," trying to keep a furious Anna at bay while grinning pityingly at Thomas. "That's difficult, but if you work for a top company, you ought to be able to pay off that much debt rapidly. You'll be okay since you can work hard, unlike me, a defective. I don't need to assist you." Unable to respond, Thomas grimaced at me and slouched out of the room. Thomas received a call from his department head the next day at work, and harsh news. Thomas's customer had overheard Thomas's nasty comments against me in the hospital corridor and had suggested terminating a contract. The customer was disillusioned and upset, and the loss was substantial because it was a big deal. Thomas was thus demoted and sent to a regional office. When his co-workers found out why he was being transferred, they treated him badly, and Thomas felt rash enough to leave the firm. Thomas's circumstances deteriorated as he now worked many part-time jobs to pay off the massive debt his mother had accrued. After fighting about the debt, his mother decided to stay with him, but they had to relocate into a rundown apartment, since Thomas's lower pay made it impossible for them to pay the condo's management costs. Their disorganized living situation soon became a joke in the neighborhood. Originally, I was going to sell the house and move into a single story after driving out Thomas and his mother. But as my leg healed, I chose to keep living in the house and canceled the sale. For 3 years, I underwent intense walking training, despite the expectation that my leg would stay compromised. This allowed me to walk without the need for a wheelchair or cane for everyday activities like shopping, but lengthy walks and jogging still caused agony. The driver who caused the accident that injured me was arrested for driving recklessly and causing death. But they chose to forego prosecution, accept a non-prosecution settlement, give up their license, and go on to lead a changed life. As a result,